To color theory foundations here at STEP Salon Education. Let's get to it, y'all. Okay, so in this class, we're going to review the ins and outs of color theory as well as the applications when working behind the chair with hair color. We're going to discuss color, toning, as well as lightening options. And the key takeaways is going to be a color theory refresh, how to tone with an alkaline color line, confidence when using an MEA-based color line as opposed to ammonia-based. And then you're also going to learn to ask for help whenever things get a little bit more complicated. So the course outline, again, we're going to go over color theory. So no color class would be complete without covering color theory and the application of it behind the chair. This is the most important step. If you are having issues with your color, I guarantee you it comes down to color theory. Next, we're going to talk about color codes and formulations. We're going to be reviewing the color line Arete, but this will apply across the board. The goal is to understand what the color line you're using is formulated in. Very important. We'll go over some of the formulation rules. Next, we'll review gray coverage, why it's important to understand proper mixing ratios to get gray coverage, as well as guidelines. We're going to review pre-softening for extremely resistant grays as well. And then we're going to talk about refreshing and toning the hair and how and when we will do each of those processes and how we can actually also use the color line to color the hair before putting on our final color. And that's going to be something called pre-pigmenting. We'll talk about that all by itself. And then we'll also cover some of the specialty applications that you can use with this color line, going into color concentrates and 000 to dilute to truly customize everything that you're doing. So let's talk about color theory first. So color theory and the application of it is extremely important when you're utilizing any color line. So take the information today as like a refresher, something that's going to strengthen your knowledge, because the science of hair and the knowledge of it, and especially color, can take you to new heights as a colorist. So I want you to give yourself permission that hair color is a chemistry and you are a modern day alchemist. So you're going to learn about the hair structure. You're going to learn how we see color and how our clients perceive color. We're going to talk about decolorization, as well as how we can enhance pigments or neutralize. And then we'll get a clear understanding of color theory. So when you have a deep understanding for the chemistry and the art of hair color, the options are limitless. So let's talk about hair structure. So the hair strand is comprised of approximately of 85% keratin protein. So it is 85% keratin. So that is where the structure of hair is coming from. That's why we have keratin straightening. That's why we have keratin in our masks and different strengthening products. We're focusing on strengthening the hair through keratin because that's primarily what it's comprised of. It's got about 12% water, and this is going to vary depending on the humidity of the area that you're in. So the more humid, the more water in the hair, the less humid, the less water in the hair. We've got less than 1% of lipids, and these are fats or fatty acids that will protect the hair from internal moisture loss. Again, we find this in our conditioners and our masks because we're trying to keep that moisture or that water in the hair. We have less than 1% melanin, and this is what each thing is affected when we do hair color. We are affecting less than 1% of the chemical composition of the hair structure, and that is the natural melanin, as well as any additional melanin that has been added in from previous colors. And then when we have less than 1% of trace elements of zinc, iron, copper, iodine, sulfur, and etc. And if you're someone who happens to live in somewhere where they have harder water or well water, then you could also have more fun elements in your hair. So generally, each strand of hair is broken up into 3 separate parts. We have the cuticle layers, which is the outside layers of the hair strand. There can be a varying amount of layers. It can be anywhere between like 5 and like 40 plus layers, depending on the strand, whether it is fine and it's smaller, medium, a little bit bigger, or coarse. And the individual size of the hair strand is what's determining whether it's fine, medium, or coarse. And that also determines the number of layer of cuticles. And everyone is going to be different. Next, we have the cortex. This is where those color molecules and the melanin live within the cortex of the hair. That is where we want our hair color to get into. So it's got to go through the cuticle layers and get into the cortex. And then we have the third section, that is the medulla. And the medulla is not present on everybody's head of hair. It's only present on people with thicker or larger hair strands. So you're not going to find it on people with finer hair. So how do we see color? So the eye is what helps us translate the world around us, and it allows us to perceive color. And there are two main kinds of receptors that are present in the eye. There are rods and there are cones. Now the rods help us to perceive depth and darkness and lightness. So when I hold up these two things, one of them is going to allow you to see the dark of the phone and the lightness of the mouse. And when you put them against each other, we're able to see the light so much more and easier when it's against the dark than versus when it's against this background. Now, our cones help us perceive tone and color. And the cones are going to be your red, yellow, and blue cones. So they're going to be corresponding to the primary colors. And they help recognize color, and they pass this information onto our brain via our nerve endings, and then our brain converts that information into a colored image. So there's a lot of different things going on. The big thing I want you to take away from this is that color is perception, and everyone has a varying amounts of how many rods and cones they have and how they're functioning. So everyone is going to perceive color differently. So that means that your client who is telling you that she doesn't like to see red in her hair, but you come to find out that every time she's describing red, she's showing you pictures of coppers and oranges, and you know that orange is not red. That is how you need to understand the perception of color, because everyone will define things differently, but also truly they are seeing things differently. If you've ever had a client who's been older or they overuse their purple shampoo, especially as they age, our blue cone is the first one to go. And so they are unable to see those cool tones. So all they see is red and yellow and orange. So that's all they're perceiving is warmth. And so that's all they can see. And so they overtone and use purple shampoos and rinses and things like that to get that ashy purple blue tone on their hair. And they don't see it. They're just trying to get white hair. They're just trying to get rid of the warmth. And it has to do with the amount of cones and the ability of those cones to actually see the object. So let's talk about the importance of melanin, and in particular, how it works with decolorizing the hair. So there are two main types of melanin that you're going to face when you're lightening hair. The first is going to be eumelanin, and this is the melanin that is going to give the hair its depth. Now it varies from a black to dark brown to a beige or kind of like tan color, and they tend to be larger in size and more oblong, and they are easily broken down by oxidative color and pre-lightening or bleach products. So you want to think of the process of lightening as shrinking color molecules and getting them smaller and smaller, because they don't truly leave the hair, they just get smaller. Now, the other one that we tend to see in hair more, and that's the one that everyone hates, is pheomelanin. This is what is going to give hair its tone, and it varies from a yellow to an orange to a red, and it's significantly smaller. And it's really hard to break down something that's small and really get rid of it. So melanin is what gives hair its natural color, and it's formed in the hair follicle. So it's formed in the scalp, and it's directly pushed into the cortex of the hair strand. So melanin is pushed into that cortex of the hair strand, so in the center of the hair strand. And the hair follicle is a small sac within the hair structure that's below the skin, and it's responsible for producing both our skin and for growing our hair and for producing melanin. And natural hair color is the result of those two types of melanin, that eumelanin and pheomelanin. Now, one of the big things that I think is super important for colors to understand is that melanin is present in other places in the body. And the melanin in the skin that we see, the melanin in the hair that we see, and the melanin in the eyes that we see are all contributing together. So we want to think of them as an entire package, not as individual pieces. Now, some people can have a third type of melanin that is called a mixed melanin, and it's a combination of the U and the pheomelanin to create a golden brown or sometimes auburn. So you're going to find this in people who have natural, very golden brown hair and people who have natural red hair. So let's take a look again at what these look like in the hair. So on this side here, we can see eumelanin. It's much longer, bigger than pheomelanin, which is this tiny little dot. So the type of melanin, eumelanin, is larger, and it's responsible again for that black, blue-based brown that's in the hair. Now, pheomelanin is going to be responsible for the reds and yellows and oranges in the hair. Now, why is eye color important? Eye color is one of those other determining factors that the amount of melanin in our body, and the job of melanin is to tell us what other melanins we're going to see. So eye color is also determined by melanin that's present in the body. And the job of melanin in the eyes is for sun protection. Just like when we think of melanin in the skin, again, for sun protection, these are living parts of our bodies that can respond to our chemistry and like our lineage to how it reacts to the sun. So myself, I'm very pink tone. I'm very pale. I do have lighter eyes. So I am definitely not someone who has a lot of natural sun protection. Those with blue, gray, or green eyes, would they have more or less protection than someone with brown or dark brown to black eyes? Let me know below. So let's talk about how we can decolorize hair with hair color. So we can use hair color, or we can utilize lightening powders and lighteners. So in Arete, we can use a 000. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the slides. Or we can utilize enlightenment powder, and this is an ammonia-based lightener. And we also have the botanical butter lightener, and this is ammonia-free. Each of them have different lightening powers. So 000 we'll talk about separately, but the enlightenment powder lightener can go up to 9 levels. It's mixed 1 to 2 with the activators, 3.5 to 40. And then the butter lightener can go up to 6 levels. This is going to be a little bit more gentler, a little bit thicker, more creamy, and no ammonia. And again, it's mixed with 3.5 up to 40 volume. So let's talk about color codes in the Arete system and what that looks like for determining our formulations. So in the Arete tonal numbering system, we have 0.0 through 0.9, and you can see there is no 0.7. Don't ask me why, it's just not there. So let's look first. Our 0.0 is going to be our natural, and this is going to be our brown, but it's going to be a cool-based brown. So any brown is going to be all 3 of our primaries mixed together, equal portions. Just dependent on that will give you standard brown. If you want to add more of one of the others, you'll either get a warmer brown or a cooler brown. The 0 has a little bit more of the blue in it, and blue is already the strongest primary. So it is going to dominate the color. And it does. So it is a cooler toned brown because most people want cooler toned colors. And most people don't want to see blue or green in their hair. So again, sorry, they don't want to see red or orange in their hair. Even though I love it, but that's why we do that, especially when we're covering gray. We want to kind of calm that stuff down. Then we have 0.1, which is going to be ash or blue. 0.2 is going to be violet. 0.3 is gold or yellow. 0.4 is copper. 0.5 is mahogany or a red violet. 0.6 is red. 0.8 is going to be a pearl, which they named it a violet gray. And then 0.9 is green. So let's look at the 6 steps for formulating our color. So the first thing we want to do is determine our client's natural starting level. We're going to look in a few different places. We're going to look in the middle of the back of their head. We're going to look at the top and then we're going to look right around their front hairline. Here, we're going to look for a variety of different things, but we need to know with the color line that we're using, what level they sit at in those different areas. Sometimes we need to mix different formulas from the front of the head to the back of the head. Sometimes we need to mix different formulas for the percentage of gray towards the temples and towards the back of the head, anything like that. If your client has different hair color throughout and different starting level, it's very important that you note that because it will change how you formulate. So first, determine their starting level using the swatch book of your color line of choice. Next, you're going to determine what our desired result is. What does the client want to see in their hair? Then we're going to determine what contributing pigment will be present at that level. So let's say our client is a natural level 5 and they have 50% gray, consistent throughout their head. Not normal, but we're going to pretend. Now, let's say their end result is something that is like a natural 7 warm brown. So a 703 in Arete. Now we know that we are going to be going up 2 levels from a 5 to a 7. And when we get to a level 7, the contributing pigment is going to be, I hope that you yelled out orange. So level 7, we're going to see orange or copper in the hair. So then we can answer question number 4, which is, do you want to enhance this copper? Do you want to balance this copper, or do you want to counteract it? Enhancing it would be enriching it with more copper and leaning into what we're seeing. Balancing it would be to kind of neutralize and just balance the color out, make it look really beautiful together, but not let it, we're not going to the warm side, we're going to the more the neutral side. And then counteract it is completely counteract that orange. And we actually want it to look ashy and cool. So in this case, our client wants to balance things out because we want a 703. Anything that's going to include a 0 in it, anything that's including a neutral in it is balancing. It's just going to change how we formulate our color. So then we're going to determine our desired shades and our desired activator. So if we want to get our client from a natural level, let's say they match to a 50, 50% gray, we can choose a variety of different shades to create that. But we're going to want to choose something that is going to balance out that orange that we see. So probably something with some blue in it to balance that out, but still keep some of the warmth because they do like that warmth. Because it's a 03, it's going to have a little bit more gold in it as well. So we may want to choose a 0, maybe add some gold in there. We get to determine. We are the artist. And then next we're going to determine our activator. And if we need to get 2 levels of lightening out of it, we're going to need to use 30 volume for it. But because we're dealing with gray, do we choose 20? I don't know. Drop your comments below. So let's talk about background and how those exist in color lines. So we've talked about how to formulate, but a big part of formulation is knowing whether or not you have a color line that contains a background. Now, what is a background? A background or a base is simply the amount of brown or black and gray that a color has. Those are the main bases that you'll see. There are some color lines with no background whatsoever. So if they contain any numbers like a 0 that indicate it's a natural or a neutral, that means brown in their color line, then you'll have to learn and formulate that way. Versus if you have a color line that does have backgrounds and you want something more vibrant, you'll need to find colors that don't have background in it so that it'll be as bright and as vibrant as you want it to be. So let's talk about Arete. So in Arete, there are only a few tubes that do not contain any background, and that is going to be the 000 or the clear. The color concentrates, so these are just like blue, violet, copper, gold, red, and green by themselves. So they can be added to any tube to create desired color. The 0.44 family, this is the copper family. There is no brown, nothing. It's just bright copper. And then also the 0.66 family. So that bright red family, just red, nothing else going on. So if you are afraid of ever hot rooting someone, steer clear of those because there's no brown. You're going to hot root them. Next, we're going to move on to the black and gray. So these are ones that are going to have a certain percentage of black or gray in the formulation, despite what the color code is. So in the black to gray families, we have 0.11, which is our ash, has 10% or less of a black or gray. And it's going to be dependent on whether it's closer to like a 2.11, that's going to be closer to black, versus a 9.11, which is way closer to the gray. And that's just determining its level of lightness and darkness is that level scale. Now our 0.1, which is our ash family, our 0.12, which is our ash violet family, our 0.8 family, which is that pearl or that violet gray family. They all are comprised of black to gray in terms of the background. And then our 0.2 or our violets are only going to have 10% of the black to gray. And again, our like 4.2 is going to be closer to the black than the 9.2 or 10.2. Next, we have our brown to tan family. So anything in the 0.0 family is going to have brown to tan because that's our neutrals, our naturals, and that also covers gray. And we want something that has brown in it and a good amount of brown in it to cover gray. And then we also have our 0.3 family that also covers gray, and that is our warm naturals family. So that is going to be a natural with more gold in it. And that's going to also cover gray. Now, why do we want brown to cover gray? We want brown to cover gray because gray or white hair is the absence of color or melanin in the hair. So if we don't have anything in there, we want all three of our primaries in the hair so that it looks healthy and looks like hair. And all three of the primaries, red, blue, and yellow, make brown when they're mixed in equal proportions. Now remember, this line is a little heavier in the blue, so it's a little cooler, but that is kind of everyone's preference. But again, that's why we're adding brown. The other ones that we have that contain that brown to tan, and again, that's just depending on how light or dark it is going to be our 0.3 or our gold family, our 0.23, our violet gold family. Those are so beautiful, by the way. Our 0.34, which is our gold copper, and that's like a strawberry family. Our 0.5, which is our mahogany or red violet family, and our 0.62, which is our red violet family. Truly a red followed by a violet. And then with our brown to tan with only 10% base or background, so only 10% of it contains a brown, is going to be our 0.6 or the red family, or the 0.4, the copper family. Now, when we talk about gray coverage, what is the most important thing to know? It's going to be how gray they are. Are they a 0 to 25%? Are they 50%? Are they 75 to 100? And when we're talking gray, we're talking white hair. I'm not talking about the pepper and the salt and pepper. I'm talking about the salt part. So that's what we want to know. So here are the gray rules for Arete. Now this is going to be different for every color line. So please read manufacturer's directions when it comes to this stuff, because again, it's going to be different. So with the percentage of hair being 25% white hair, we're going to mix 25% of our formula, or in this case, 10 grams to 30 grams of our target shade. So we're doing a 40-gram bowl of color here to 60 grams of activator, because this is mixed at a 1 to 1.5 ratio. So we would mix 10 grams or 25% of our formula. Next, if we have 50% gray, we're going to mix 50% of our formula. It's going to be the coverage shade. And again, that's going to be from the 0 family or the 0 0.03 family. So either our neutrals or our warm neutrals. We're going to mix half of that and then half of our target. If they're 75% gray, we're going to mix 75% of our formula in our coverage shade and 25% in our target shade. Now, when we move to 100% white hair, and remember that's our gray that we're focusing on is the white hair, we are going to have 87.5% of our formula be our coverage shade, which is 35 grams in this case, and 5 grams, or I don't want to do math on the spot, y'all. 12.5% of our formula be our target shade. Now, for maximum coverage of white hair, they suggest 20 volume. They apply fine, even sections, process for a full 45 minutes. And if you're looking for ultimate coverage, this is someone who you've tried standard mixing ratio, doesn't work. You're going to want to mix 1:1. This is going to increase the pH of the color, because if we compare the pH of hair color and the pH of our activator or developers, the hair color is much higher on the pH scale than our activators are. So less activator means higher pH. More activator means lower pH. And you can also apply a loose fitting cap if needed. So let's talk about refreshing and toning the hair. So here are the color balancing guides when it comes to Arete. If someone is faded less than 1 level, we're just going to pull through the last 5 to 10 minutes. This is something I love to do. I love to spray water on their hair first. This also helps to move the color through and not, I don't know, just, it looks better and it applies better. I swear, I just love it. If they're faded 1 to 3 levels, we're going to pull through immediately because we want to balance their color out, and we're going to let it process the full time. So we're going to set our timer once we've finished applying our base. We'll turn our timer on for either 35 or 45 minutes, and then we'll let them process. But then we're going to immediately go through with our formula for our mids and ends. Let it go through. If they're sensitized, we would pre-pigment. And again, we'll talk about that later. If they're faded more than 3 levels, we need to pre-pigment them before putting it on, because otherwise they are just going to fade. So here are the toning guides. If we're toning with alchemic color, we're going to mix 1 to 2. And again, if we're increasing our activator or developer, we are decreasing the pH. So we can mix with 3.5, 5, or 10. 3.5 is going to give you more sheer results. Think of like a pantyhose. 5 is going to give you a little bit more opaque, like a tight. And 10 is going to give you more like, we're not seeing through this stuff, like pants. Then we also are able to pastelize or lighten any of the tubes that we have. So let's say we're taking a level 10 and we want to lighten it up to like a 12 because someone really wants to be clean, white, platinum. We're going to use 000 to do this because it's a clear. And we're going to take 10 grams to 30 grams of a 40-gram bowl to create a level 12. So we're taking 75% of our formula to 25% to take it up 2 levels. And we can do the same thing with taking up the rest of our levels as well. So I love the customability of that by using clear, and you can do that in other lines as well. So let's talk about pre-pigmenting. Let's say someone is 3+ levels faded and we've got to pre-pigment them. Let's talk about how to do that. So when we pre-pigment someone, each color line is going to have their own rules. That's why it's so important that whatever color line you end up using behind the chair, that you read and know that dossier or technical guide like everything, like it is your baby, because it's going to contain all the information that the color manufacturer wants you to know. And 9 times out of 10, if you go to any educator, they're going to ask you to do the manufacturer's suggestions first and make sure that you're doing those first before we try some other things. So here are the pre-pigmenting guides. So if someone wants to be a target level 9, the contributing pigment at a level 9 is yellow. So we can see that on the right hand here. We basically want to fill in with the hair. This is why it's typically called a fill or a pre-pigment. We want to fill into the hair what's missing. And at a level 8, what's missing is yellow orange. So you can see here we've got what we would fill with if we're aiming for a cool target shade, and that's something that's a 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, or our warm target shades are 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. So we are only sticking with golds or 0.3s as our pre-pigment or our fill. If we're doing cooler tones, if we're doing warmer tones, we are moving down in terms of our warms. So we're starting with a gold and then a gold copper or a copper at a level 9. And this, I would choose each of these dependent on which one I'm picking. So let's say I want a level 8 that is going to be like a gold or a copper. I'm going to probably choose the 934 instead, because I probably don't want my copper to be super bright. I want it to be natural looking. So that's what I would choose. If I want it to be bright, I'm going to pick 9.4. If I'm looking for a level 8.6, then I'm probably going to use the 9.4. I probably want copper to get that red ready. So you want to think that if you want something brighter, you're going to use the lighter option to fill. If you want something that is going to hold and have more longevity, then you're going to want to use the brighter or darker option when it comes to the reds. So screenshot this, save this. This is your bestie. So here's how we pre-pigment. So we're going to choose our shade. We're going to mix it 1 to 1.5 with 5 or 10. So we're doing a standard mixing ratio instead of a toning ratio. Apply in fine sections just to where it needs to be pre-pigmented. Allow it to process a full 35. Rinse the hair thoroughly until it's clear. Shampoo, condition, towel dry, and then blow dry until 85%. And then we're going to apply our target shade to the new growth. Start our timer at 35 and then apply the target shade to the lengths and ends and allow it to process the remaining of the time. And then we're going to wash and rinse everything out. And again, every manufacturer has different directions when it comes to this. So know what they say to do. So here's some of the specialty applications. I love that we can do custom toning with adding color, hair color concentrates with Arete. So they have a blue or a 0.11, a violet 0.22, a yellow 0.33, a orange 0.44, a red 0.66, and a green 0.99. Now, these are all, again, across the board, 40-gram bowls are the examples that they're using. So for a 40-gram bowl, and we're trying to add a concentrate to a level 2 to a level 6, we are going to add 10% of our formula for a minimum intensity. If we want to add something more intense and we want it to be kind of a little bit stronger of like that blue or that red that we're adding to our formula, we are going to move up to 17.5%. I love thinking in percentages when it comes to adding color concentrates because this helps us really customize the color to our client. We are really acting like that crazy alchemist in there and mixing those colors. And what we're doing is we're determining how much we want it to affect our formula. Now, if we want maximum intensity, we're adding 25%. So we range from 10 to 25% when we're adding our additives. Now, you're a colorist, you can do whatever you want. If you want to go more than 25%, just know that you're going to see a lot of that color concentrate and not so much of your color. Now, if we're using the color concentrates on a level 7 to 10, we have smaller percentages that we're putting in. So if we want a minimum intensity for any of these from a level 7 to 10, we're only going to include 2.5%. And then we bump up to 7.5 or 8.75 for these. And you may ask yourself, why are these higher? Why are these higher here in the middle? And that's because these are less pigmented than these two. Anything that contains blue is the strongest primary. It is always going to be more dominant. So these are just a little bit weaker. And then again, once we move into something that has blue back in it, green, we have a little bit less of the concentrate. So we're moving from 2.5% to 7.5 to 8.75 to 10 to 12.5%. So this range is 2.5 to 12.5% for these higher levels. And you can intensify it even more and go higher. Just know that your color concentrate is going to show through a lot more. Now, another amazing tool is to utilize 000 if you want to use it for lightning purposes. It can be used by itself to dilute, it can be used to dilute any color, or it can use by itself to lighten natural hair. And this means hair that has no previous chemical services done on it before. So you can utilize it with 10 volume to get up to 1 level, 20 volume, 1 to 2, 30 volume, 2 to 3, and 40 volume up to 3. And that's a really cool, fun tool to have. The thing you need to be thinking about is that you will still need to tone this afterwards, because if you do not want the natural warmth that's going to be present when you do this, you're going to have to tone for it. And then here's some more of our dilution table of how we can dilute using 000. Again, it's a really cool, amazing tool to have. So I hope that this class was helpful. I hope that you were able to learn about utilizing the color line, utilizing any color line, understanding the importance of color theory when it comes to creating our hair color formulations and all of that. I wish you the best of luck, and you got this.